like I said, I had always seen this like traditional like happy marriage.
A sheltered view of marriage.
So my first year of marriage, I kid you not, it was our hardest year of marriage. And I remember we were in our room one time and I told him, I was like, if this is marriage, I'm straight. Like, I'm not, this is terrible. I was like, I don't want to do it. Yeah. The reason why though is because I had to start looking at me. Yeah. Like, why are you thinking this way? Like, he's doing everything that he can. Like, are these healthy thoughts? So I started to ask myself, like, before you go into an argument that has, like, out of thin air, right, on, like, maybe your feelings, like, where is this coming from? Yeah. Was something actually done? Yeah. Is this true? Like, I would ask myself, is this actually true? Yeah. Have you been given the reasons to feel this way? Yeah. And then I would talk to self and be like, well, no, like, actually... A, B, and C has happened that is way off the mark of what I'm thinking. So I would retreat before I open my mouth because it wasn't going to help us. And then also with God, like I would ask, I would talk to him and be like, God, like help me to not suppress these feelings, but like understand the truth of like, what is this right that I'm feeling? Like, is this from the right place? And so a lot of those thoughts, like really having to think and not counsel myself, but sometimes you can get practical advice from somebody, but it's really you that has to actually execute.
Yeah. I just don't believe that we were saved to stumble our way through life this side of heaven. I believe that we should respond to his saving grace with a life that glorifies him in every way, both the spiritual and the practical. Welcome to the SavedTlk Podcast. I got my co-host Guy with me.
What it do?
And I got a new face, my beautiful bride, my sidekick, my wife is here, Joan. Super excited. I know you guys have heard so many stories about my life and some of the things that I've struggled with, and I've brought up many times my wife and somewhat of the role that she's played in my journey with the Lord. And I just thought it would be great to bring her on and allow you guys to kind of like hear from her perspective. But I also know that there's some questions that Guy has, just being in his seat, coming out of that broken relationship and journeying with God, and kind of looking at my life and seeing where God has taken me in my new marriage, my new relationship. So yeah, man, like let's kick this off.
Nah, for real. Nah, I'm very excited to talk to you guys. Obviously, me and you have similar stories, but to be able to see how God has kind of walked with you through everything that you've been through, reconciliation, maybe not to a person, but back to himself. And you being faithful, bro. I think one part that you don't get credit for is, despite where you were before you met your wife, like since then you've been faithful, and God has been faithful in rewarding you in a sense.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just excited just to hear from y'all. Coming from the other side. Y'all made it to the other side. Y'all made it to where I want to be. Coming from where I came from. So I think a lot of people's going to be blessed from you guys' story, because it's very unique. I think it would be informative for people that's in the same situation that I'm in, same situation that you was in, situation that you was in. So we get a chance to hear from Joan and you guys, and let's get it.
Let's do it, man. Appreciate you, bro.
So Joan, welcome.
Thanks.
SavedTlk Podcast. So prior episode, Gio has been really open about his journey, whether that's, from his dad to his past relationships and to you, right? So the viewers really don't, know you from you. They know you from Gio, from his perspective. So today, we're just going to have a conversation about who are you, how'd you come to the faith, how'd y'all meet? So we're going to get into all that. So just introduce yourself from your perspective for people who don't really know you.
So I'm Joan. So a little bit about me, like our childhoods were a little bit different and our life dynamics. So I grew up moving to a lot of different states. My mom is a physician, so she's a doctor, brain injury rehab. The only reason I bring it up is because we moved a lot. So we went to like really random small states at times just because her specialty was like the only one in demand, and she would be that doctor. So having said that, also, my parents worked super hard to give me the life that I had, and I had a really great childhood. I didn't miss out on opportunities. I got a lot of different experiences from my parents. And yeah, I mean, everything that I remember, I was I have fond memories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something I also remember is my parents being married for a really long time. They did a really good job of kind of sheltering me in a sense about relationships, because I didn't witness a lot of like disagreements and things like that. So I just saw a happy marriage. How about that?
So you had an example of what a healthy marriage.
Yeah. So so that was my family. I have a few siblings like Gio. I have two younger siblings and two older, but my older are half. And I guess the reason why that's important and kind of shaped a little bit on the experiences that we had is that my half brother and sister, I call them my whole, like there's no really difference, but we grew up close, and I grew up seeing my mom, like try to embrace that situation. So as you know, like we have Naya, and so anyways, that's a different subject. But yeah, that was kind of my life, my childhood. Everything was a lot of academics. So my parents were really, really heavy on being studious, getting good grades. My mom was so funny about grades. So even if I got a B, she was like, you're losing your phone for like a whole semester type of thing. So she was very strict, very structured about school. Everything was to lead up to, college, and like you have to get your master's and all the things, which formed a lot of my thought process in finding my partner and what credentials I thought they should have. And then in terms of the faith, I grew up in a Pentecostal church. So what does that look like? Veils, skirts below the knee, no earrings, didn't comb my hair. I didn't get earrings till I was like 15. Very old.
Traditional.
Very traditional. And so it was interesting growing up because I grew up in the church. My parents were both in music ministry. So my mother sang. My dad played Latin percussion in the church. And this was in New Jersey when I first started going to church, or where I was, brought up in church. But yeah, I think that I didn't have a great understanding because it was so traditional. And so like, you do this at this time, and like service is this, and you dress a certain way. Like there were so many legal aspects to it that I think I grew up just like having the idea or the seeds planting from my parents of, feeling like I love God, but I don't know that I fully understood what my relationship looked like with God. So until my later years, it was interesting. I think that I was always like the goody two shoes of my friends. And I thought that it was enough, for example, it's just an example of like where my walk was, enough to be like the good one out of them and try to be an influence, if that makes sense, on like certain things they would do.
You're trying to be the example to them.
But there's a fine line, because sometimes I would be around certain behaviors and not speak up enough. Does that make sense? Because when you love your friends, you should also be an influence in that way, and not just be like, well, I'm not going to judge or I'm not going to comment. Does that kind of? Yeah. So anyways, once we met, I considered that I love Christ, but I had a lot of maturing to do in my walk. And I was introduced to the Brook when we started dating. And so the Brook had a very big impact, which, by the way, that's our church, but very impact on me. I think it was the first church that I felt comfortable in really getting deep into the word and understanding like what does it look like for me to actually love God, not just say it, and like really have a relationship with him. And so it was very impactful for me to see a group of, young adults that really went into the word or pressed into the word to try to understand. The reason why that matters is because I grew up in the church, which means, or in my case, it was a lot of like adults around me or like elders, and there wasn't like a heavy emphasis on youth and like growing up. So you kind of just went with the flow, right? Like your parents wanted you to go and you went, and not that I felt pressured, but like there wasn't that extra intimate touch of like same kind of like age group. And, and I grew up in now I moved around a lot, right? So like I went to Mississippi and El Paso, Texas. Yeah. It was really hard to find
a stable.
Yeah, like a stable church, and then like find one that was healthy and theology and practicality. So it's been an interesting journey, but that's kind of me in a nutshell. I hope that
of course. I do want to touch on the history of your relationship for a little bit. So very like just basic, like how did y'all meet?
Yeah.
How did that meeting lead to engagement?
Yeah.
Eventually marriage.
So I moved back from El Paso, Texas, where I finished college. El Paso would give me anxiety. No disrespect to my El Paso folks, but it was so small. No, it was just a small community. Like everybody kind of does the same thing. Whereas Miami, like, there's so much to do and so many options, whether it's career, whether it's just anything, right? So my friends were welcoming me back and were like, Joan's back, And so one of my friends who's mutual friends with him, I invited him to come out with another group of friends.
Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to my boy Ryan.
So they didn't know.
Y'all still friends to this day?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ryan didn't know all my other friends, so he basically brought him as like support or a wingman at that time because he was out, outside. So I lost my...
He was a model at that time, right?
Oh my gosh.
Stop it.
Actually, that's a great subject. So backtrack. Ryan...
He was a model at that time?
No, it was not.
You was not a model?
No, man.
So Ryan, 2 years prior, I came back to Miami. I would come visit periodically when I was out for college. So Ryan and I went to have dinner or lunch or something like that. And we were talking about my relationship. So he was talking about like long distance. So I had done for probably 3 years straight long distance relationship. It didn't make any sense, honestly. Yeah. It was kind of maybe a selfish thing in a way because I felt like, I'm so busy with like school that like I don't really want to have somebody there, but like the emotional support of talking to someone is nice. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Having said that, we were talking about that. He was like, that's just weird. I think that's what he said. But he was like, I have this guy and I know it's like long distance, but this guy would be perfect for you. And I'm like, who is he? So he shows me his modeling picture, his Instagram. And I looked at that thing and I was like, bro, please. Like my whole image of Miami,
that was 2 years before y'all met.
That was 2 years before we met. Yeah.
So my image of Miami guys was like, oh no.
That's
like, look at this guy. He thinks he's Papi Chulo with the curls. And I'm like, not me. Like I felt like Miami was, I love Miami, but sometimes that it's so embedded in the superficial aspect of somebody that like that wasn't attractive to me. And because I had moved and seen Mississippi, El Paso, small towns, and like there was just more to people. Like you really had to get to know people and make your fun. It just wasn't attractive. So my first impression of him was like, no way. Having said that, Ryan was like, follow him. And I was like, ew, no. Like, I'm not going to follow him. Like, I'm that type of woman. Like,
girl, you ain't no ill.
You don't
Stop
follow. No, but you don't pursue the man. Yeah, they pursue you.
Exactly,
all the things.
Exactly. So, that's coming from the traditional background that she came from.
Yeah. So he kept like insisting. So I pressed follow. Probably 2 seconds later, I unfollowed. I was like, no, I don't do that. That's not cute. So that was that. So 2 years later, I actually didn't really associate that the man he showed me was him. it kind of like came up later on, but it was a very interesting aspect that I had kind of seen my future husband 2 years before. But interesting enough, part of that conversation with Ryan was like, he's great for you. He's amazing. Like his morals line up with yours, but it wouldn't even be the right time to introduce you guys. He's going through something.
Yeah.
And the timing isn't there. So that was that. I never thought about it again. Unfollowed him in 2 seconds. He never knew I followed him. And so that was an interesting comment though from Ryan and just where he was at. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't really care at that time, but yeah.
Okay, so fast forward to you invite Ryan out, then Ryan invite
yes, so
Gio
I veered off a lot. Sorry about that.
No.
So Ryan, he comes. I'm super happy to see him. It says Gio comes. I'm like, hey, what's up? How are you? I don't know him, so I just introduced myself, and that was really that. I went off. So I love to dance, love it. My parents are very musical. My parents grew up dancing side. So I just enjoy it as a pastime. So I can get lost in myself just dancing, on my own. So I was having a good time with my friends, dancing. And then at one point, he kind of came near me, and his perspective is different. At that time, I think you would say you were looking around town, he wasn't really...
Yeah, I was checking out every girl in there.
So I wasn't really in the mix, and I really didn't pay attention. So he did come and approach me and asked me if I wanted a drink. So I was like, no, I'm good. Appreciate it. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I'm good. He's like, oh, you don't want a drink? I don't really I maybe casually drink now, but back then it was I didn't do well with I didn't enjoy the taste of alcohol in any way. So he then was like, well, do you want a water? I was like, absolutely. So he got me a water and a Red Bull to keep me going because I was going. Yeah, I could dance all night. And so, that was that. So that was our first interaction, but you have a different perspective. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty spot on. I was just looking at the different women there. I don't know. I noticed something just about the way she carried herself, even though she was dancing and have a good time. It was very it was respectable. There wasn't. You can just tell when I've grown up in Miami my entire life. So you can kind of pick up on a lot of the women that are that have grown up here and the culture. The way they carry themselves, what's considered normal in the way that they party and have fun, and she was having fun, but she was reserved as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course I get it.
And that, I don't know, it just kind of caught my eye. So I just started having conversation where she had a great personality and stuff, and that's how we ended up talking. We actually ended up going out to eat afterwards.
That same night,
it was a group of us. We all went to, I don't know, IHOP or something like that.
Not just us.
Yeah.
I thought it was just
no, it wasn't just us. It was a group.
No,
it was a group of us.
Ryan went, our friend.
Yeah, it was a group of us that went, and it was different, because it was I was at that point I was very drawn to who she was as a person. Where typically
that night.
Yeah.
Where y'all had conversation.
Well, yeah, we were kind of talking back and forth a little bit. It wasn't heavy talk.
Friendly though.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never
No
had
flirting?
an inclination of flirting.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I wasn't really seeing him. So I also have grown up not tomboy, but I had a lot of male friends, and it was just friends. And so hence Ryan, and we had Ryan had a little group of guy friends that I knew that he actually knew as well, and we were friends with the same group, but we never crossed paths.
Okay.
So I was just seeing him one of the guys. I was like, oh, guy friend, part of the little clique or whatnot.
So that night, and then when, I'm thinking y'all probably exchanged numbers or
no. So we didn't exchange numbers. We that night, I don't know how deep you want to go into your thoughts, but
did you ask her for her number?
No.
Oh my God.
No. So that night we see. So then the next day, Gio in a group chat with the guys that I was in. I was like,
You was in the
I was
group
like one of the
Yeah.
guys,
Oh,
I
wow.
guess.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, he was like, let's hit the beach. And then everyone was kind of tired. So I was like, I'll go, but I was kind of tired. And then the other guys weren't responding much. And he was very adamant about going to the beach. And in the group chat, he was like, Joan, I'll come pick you up. And I'm like, okay. Like, he just wanted to make sure we got to
Go
the beach.
Yeah. So at this,
When you wrote that, was it specific?
yeah.
Like-
So I set up the group chat.
Okay.
I don't know if I told Kobe or Ryan. Let's all hang out. Bring Joan, because there was a sense of curiosity that I had towards her. I would say, again, being transparent. I would say the hesitation I had was like I was very superficial, right? And at that time, she was a little heavier.
Yeah.
And for me, like I was looking for girls like, you know what I'm saying? Like
you was a model.
just like
You're looking for a model.
anyway, and you know, like that was a big deal for me. You know, just the physical fitness aspect of it and all that. And that was still like heavy on my mind,
Yeah.
you know. But there was still something I was just drawn. I was drawn. So we went to the beach. We all met up. Well, actually, interesting story. She comes to my house. They all meet at my house, right? And she had no idea I was still living with my ex-wife at the time.
When she come to your house, was your ex-wife there?
No, she wasn't there. My daughter wasn't there either.
Okay. So how did you tell her? Or
Yeah. I just
So, I didn't know, honestly. I just thought it was his house. And then he told me like, oh, I said, oh, nice house or something. And I think you were already packing up to like move. So he was like, yeah, but it's my house with my ex-wife. I think that's what you said.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, what I said was like, this is so-and-so's room. This is my room with my daughter. And then my ex-wife is in there.
Okay.
And then
Sleeps
I
in
was
there.
like, ex-wife? But he was like, yeah, like things didn't work out. Oh yeah, he said things didn't work out, but he didn't add context, and I wasn't gonna pry. So I was like, oh man, like that's rough, but like I'm sure you guys will make it. I'm sure you guys will make it back together. Like you guys can make it through. Like, you know, I'll be thinking of that for y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then my boys at once were just like, nah, like
Ain't coming.
this ain't being repaired.
But
like,
that's that's very unique though. So after the beach, I'm pretty sure, you know, y'all started talking. So how did it go from like, yeah, you know, like I hope you get back to your ex-wife. I hope y'all reconcile to eventually started
Yeah.
like dating the person.
So he did
know.
mention after I said that comment, he was like, no, actually, I think you said like what happened.
yeah, I was just like, it's irreparable. Like there's, you know,
He
there's
kind of, like-
unfaithfulness pretty much. You know?
And then I was like, oh man, like never mind, like I feel you. So I didn't know, but the way that it happened after that was after the beach, I think that he got my number through the group chat,
Yeah.
right? Like we didn't, and then he texted me directly, and I think you said,
That night.
yeah, you wanted something. He talked about
Yeah.
me as a person.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact words, but he said, I think you're really cool, you know, like kind of accented things about my personality,
Yeah.
and said that he wanted to get to know me.
Yeah, so I pretty much, after the beach, I sat in the car and I was like, man, like this girl really does seem like a quality person. Why am I struggling?
So
You know, like-
backtrack though, something important is at the house before we left to the beach, Ryan ended up telling me Gio was a pastor.
Which that was a rule breaker
For you?
for me.
For me,
Oh,
it
for
was
you.
like,
So I had
cool.
Wait,
had
what was the rule breaker for you?
that the people that I was hanging out with, my friends at the
they
time,
can't say that you.
they
were
can't
pastor.
tell
Oh,
people.
okay.
I told them I don't want, because of the way I was living.
Yeah.
So I was like, y'all don't ever tell people that I was a pastor,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay, I see.
none of that.
Oh, Ryan told me that, and I thought that was so dope. So I was like, what? That's dope. So I went to my car. I had this book I was reading about, I think it was discipleship.
Spiritual growth or something like that.
And I was like, oh, you got to see this book. And then he was like, oh, like, I don't know what he was thinking in his mind. But yeah, that's how that started. So then when we went to the beach, we actually had conversation about, I think I asked him a question about his standpoint just in his mindset on Christianity, and I don't remember.
Yeah, it was a deep conversation.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, deep conversation, and that's how that went. So after the beach, he got my number from the group chat, messaged me, and then you were.
Yeah, and then so I was in the car, and I just kind of sat in the car for like 30 minutes. I'm like, man, why am I struggling with the way I feel towards her, you know? And I think I was trying to avoid not being honest with myself and pretty much just saying like, no, the reason why you don't want to pursue her is because of her weight. Now, have you? She was 30 pounds heavier than what she was now.
Mm-hmm.
Some people wouldn't even consider her like overweight or anything like that, you know? But I remember I had this therapist, Jamaican lady. Her name is Sonia. Shout out to Sonia. She was a professor at TIU.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just a pivotal person in my life. And she was doing the marital counseling with me and my ex-wife,
mm-hmm.
you know, and continued counseling with me, therapy, even after we separated. And one of the things she said to me that like stuck with me was that most men that experience the type of divorce that I experienced, in other words, they were with someone that, you know, dealt with difficulty in marriage, or whatever the case may be, with unfaithfulness,
mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, and that type of thing. 90% of these men end up with the same type of woman in their next relationship because they never take the time to identify the type of woman that they naturally are inclined to pursuing and why, you know? And I remember like thinking about that at that moment in the car, and I'm like, if I don't make a mature and wise and non-superficial decision, I will continue to experience this cycle in life where I'm dating women that don't have the values and the integrity, the moral stance, you know, that I was picking up, even with her like immaturity as a Christian, you know, you could still tell that there was like this sense of morality that was important to her, values that was important to her. And I remember that night I was like, you know what, I need to make a decision that I haven't been making. And my way of doing that was texting her and saying, hey, would it be cool if we just got to know each other as friends? You know, to see where things kind of go. I didn't say that part though, see where things kind of go. I just said, hey, I just want to get to know you as a friend. Would you? And she was like, as friends? And I was like, yeah, as friends. She was like, all right, cool. And that's how that.
Now, from the time that I guess y'all decided to date, it didn't take long for y'all to get engaged or married.
No.
Right? What went into that decision? Mm-hmm. Like what was that process? Like that thought process, like, yo, like we're not gonna date for 2 years, or we're not gonna be engaged for 2 years, how most couples do.
Yeah, so I'll be the one to answer this because it was me that made that decision and pursued her with that level of focus. For me, I'm just wired in the sense that like once I know what I want,
go for it.
I'm going after it. Like very little hesitation. And that can be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. At times, but I think with maturity and wisdom, you learn how to control that. And I think that when it came to my wife, I got such an immense amount of experience from my last marriage. And then just all the therapy that I got, you know, understanding myself, understanding relationships, the counseling that I got from Pastor Mucci, you know, and his wife Diamond, I think prepared me to be able to make a better decision, a wiser decision. So when I realized that it was my own superficialness that was standing in between me and someone that could actually be an amazing life partner, not just for me, because I'm, you know, I got to think about my daughter as well, you know. I kind of just took a leap of faith. It really was a leap of faith, and some people will probably frown upon that. Oh, how was it a leap of faith? But I'm telling you how I was wired.
So what was the time frame?
It was 6 months. So we dated for how long?
We dated 7 months and then got engaged.
Yeah. So we dated. So in 7 months of us knowing each other, we got engaged.
Got engaged or married?
Engaged.
Engaged. And then after y'all got engaged, how long?
6 months, right?
No.
Oh, it was less than that.
Married at 11 months. So.
11 months. So the totality of your relationship before marriage is 11 months.
Yeah, less than a year.
Less than a year.
Almost a year.
Yeah. So you have, so just like you said, you have enough experience from your past marriage, and you were able to go through a process. But Joan, you kind of grew up in a traditional church, and saying that you grew up in a traditional church, I'm pretty sure your family had a very traditional background, which you also do. So you wasn't married before, so you didn't have experience, right? You it doesn't seem like, and I could be wrong, that like when you more of a person that, okay, let me think about this, let me sit down, let me process, so how was that for you, or you just kind of allow him to lead? What?
So I don't think that like the concept of like you found the one, like you're gonna know, is like just gonna be it. But I think God is so intentional in like showing you indicators about your partner, and there's always gonna be like doubt, I guess you could say, or like questions, right? Like, is this the one? But the way that he pursued me was like so sure. And it was so easy to fall in love with him, with how he courted me. Like, you probably couldn't, or not probably, I couldn't understand the hurt he had at that time still, which was so interesting in the beginning, because he was like so adamant about how he pursued me, so adamant about how he connected with my family. Even though they were in Texas, he made it a point to like write my parents a letter and describe like who he was and what his intentions were with me early on, which was marriage. Like he told my parents straight up in a paper, which my parents, to your point, were like, who is this dude?
Exactly, because they're traditional. I know.
Say he's going to marry you.
Yeah.
And, backtracking, I had long relationships in the past, very unhealthy, but when my parents left, I was in my senior year of high school. And at that time, I was with a gentleman for 4 years. He was like my first serious relationship. And they had a freak out moment because like I was trying to do things all wrong. Like we were like, oh, we'll move in and they were like, what are you doing? Yeah. So I think the fact that they were far and then now they're getting a random letter from this guy saying he's going to marry me, was interesting. But the aspect of like the relationship, there were signs through prayer that I was like, okay, I think this is the one, But backtracking to your question, because I don't want to veer off, can you repeat your question so I can?
No, because like I said, like one of the reasons why like he moved so quickly is like the reason he stated he had experience, he went through counseling, and that's his personality.
Yeah.
Once he sees what he wants, whether that's, you could see that in business and even with this, like, what I'm saying? But that's not your personality.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of see your thought process and how was that.
So that's
that time period.
Yeah. So yes, I do. I am analytical and I think about things and what's the worst possible scenario. And so, yes, it was easy to go into it because of all the things that I mentioned. Yeah. But then there was the other side of me that did think of all the worst case scenarios. Yeah. And this is where insecurity started to come in, because all of my past relationships, although not as of much substance as Gio's, because he was married and I was I was young and in a relationship. A lot of them ended in someone cheating on me. And so I was playing out worst case scenario at the same time, trying to kind of protect myself too, where I would like pull back from him because we were in a really awkward situation where obviously he was going through a divorce. Still in the same home as his ex-wife. obviously, as we mentioned. And that's the thing. It was like a tug of war because he did many things that were so just like
Assuring.
like so assuring and like really just being mindful of me. Like if he was in the house, he would have himself on speaker, me on speaker, like to show me like I'm not hiding anything. Like, you know, she may be here, but like I'm about you. You know, he'd be like, come to the house. I'd be like, no, that's freaking weird. Like
That is weird.
it's super weird. But like he was like, you know, he was really trying to show me like despite the situation and like the awkward timing, like I want you to know like I'm about you. Right. But then even with his actions, it was I was replaying like, no, you've gotten played before. Like, how is it really that he's over his ex-wife? That he fought,
and seeing me, but you got to experience
that he
me
fought
hurt
for,
too.
That I knew he fought for hard, right? That primarily the reason it didn't work out wasn't because he didn't desire it, right? So then I'm like letting that, and then what was it that you just said?
No, I was just saying, like you saw me hurt. You start to see the cracks show.
Also,
you know,
even though he was so sure of me and showing me through his actions, I also had to see him hurting over this person.
How did you fight through that process? Like personally, not like just on your own thoughts about knowing that, like this man, you know, like wanted to continue to pursue a relationship with his ex-wife, and the only reason that it didn't work is wasn't his choice, it was her choice. So I know you say he did certain things to kind of assure you, but also just the type of person you are, how did you battle through that? And what made you, apart from things that he did, because I also know that plays a role in it, but apart from that, just, you know, maybe your own conversations with God, maybe your own conversation with a therapist or your family. Like, how did you wrestle through that? Because I think a lot of people it may be in that same situation.
So it was exactly what you said. So now this wasn't a 1 week, 1 month, 2 months. This has been years of me having to have conversations with God and myself. Because when your partner is doing everything they can in their physical capacity to show you or do the right things, and you continue to have thoughts that press against it with no validity, that is toxic in itself. And you're now bringing strife to the relationship. So I started to notice that, right? Whereas patience was running a little bit thinner because he's like, what else can I do? You know, like, what else can I physically do? And to your point, it was a lot of, and that's where marriage was interesting for me, because like I said, I had always seen this like traditional, like happy marriage.
A sheltered view of marriage.
So my first year of marriage, I kid you not, it was our hardest year of marriage. And I remember we were in our room one time, and I told him, I was like, if this is marriage, I'm straight. Like, I'm not, this is terrible. I was like, I don't want to do it. The reason why, though, is because I had to start looking at me. Like, why are you thinking this way? Like, he's doing everything that he can. Like, are these healthy thoughts? So I started to ask myself, like, before you go into an argument that has, like, out of thin air, right, on, like, maybe your feelings, like, where is this coming from? Was something actually done? Is this true? Like, I would ask myself, is this actually true? Have you been given the reasons to feel this way? And then I would talk to self and be like, well, no, like, actually, A, B, and C has happened that is way off the mark of what I'm thinking. So I would retreat before I open my mouth, because it wasn't going to help us. And then also with God, like, I would ask, you know, I would talk to him and be like, God, like, help me to not suppress these feelings, but like understand the truth of like, what is this right that I'm feeling? Like, is this from the right place? And so a lot of those thoughts, like really having to think and not counsel myself, but sometimes you can get practical advice from somebody, but it's really you that has to actually execute. And so it's very important. That was really the only way that we made it through. And also fortunate enough, you know, talking. Now, our communication wasn't bad, but Gio's very, as you know, passionate and like stuck in how he wants things and sees things. And so it was sometimes not helpful for me to be the one to talk to him about how I felt because we were just not seeing eye to eye. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man. And I think a big part of it from your story is, once again, like I said, and Gio said it, I think it's taking a leap of faith. That's people undermine that so much. Yeah. That if you just take a leap of faith and trust God, you know, like he's faithful to guide you. Like he's faithful to lead you. That's good. You know what I'm saying? So, and then also Gio had a daughter from his past relationship. So how was that? 'Cause like, are you the youngest of your siblings?
No, I'm middle.
You're the middle. Okay.
Honestly, it was easy.
The transition?
Yeah.
Of adopting a baby at 5 years old?
For me, you know, I highlighted the fact that my mom kind of embraced my older siblings. Eventually, I don't know. I'd be lying if I said I knew how that journey evolved. But from what I've been able to remember and see, it's that my mom has open arm embraced my siblings. So it was kind of normal for me to be like, oh, that's not my blood, but like that's a child, right? Like I liked, I won't say it, I love kids, like I do. Yeah.
Did you have a conversation with Naya?
So she was so young. Okay. I think the way that I was present for her, the thing was like there was so much going on between him and his ex-wife, and they were both like figuring out what that season looked like of co-parenting. And the way that I focused on Naya was like she was a little sponge, you know, at 5 years old. It's like this interesting age where they're starting grade school, and I just tried to be there for her. Okay. Because I think both of them were still like wrestling through a lot. And I saw the ways in which it could affect her and how I could play a negative part in that too, right? So with my insecurity, I'm like, oh, you love your ex, all these things. Like, I started having to think about her now. Yeah. Like, is that right for her? Absolutely not. Yeah. So it wasn't hard, honestly. Like,
yeah, if I can chime in.
Did you have a conversation with Nadia
regarding the new relationship?
Facts.
Yeah, I did. But it was kind of like for Naya, her being so young, there was no like pushback or anything like that. Naya like very quickly embraced her, you know, and they had a great relationship. Yeah. And they have a great relationship, you know. But what I was gonna say is like, you know, if you think about like everything that Joan was like trying to carry at that time, you know, like battling her own insecurities, being a facilitator, because really she was the more level-headed one regarding the way me and my ex-wife communicated. I'm still hurt, so I'm still like, you know, very short-tempered, you know, working on forgiving her, you know, forgiveness and stuff like that, and that shows up when there's disagreements, you know. And she's having to be there to kind of like be the one to, you know, before you say that, pause, think about this, or grab my phone and not allow me to send a text message that I was just about to send, you know. And at the same time, like making sure that Naya was being catered to the right way, you know. It was a lot, you know, And I think she, I don't know, she thrived. It was just more, as time went on, it was more affirming for me the decision and the type of woman that she was, you know.
But I think the biggest thing, because not everybody's transition looks like mine, it's the thought process, right? Like, obviously my life molded the way I thought about things because my family was so adamant about like us embracing my siblings and like us being a family, however that looked, you know, in a healthy way. A lot of people don't come into that, and I've had friends who really struggle like embracing a child that is not theirs, and they're indifferent. They're not 5, they're 10, and now have more of their own thoughts. And you know, even now 5-year-old Naya looks way different than 12-year-old Naya. Naya is very opinionated, headstrong, you know, like, so it's a journey. But I think it has to come down to like, as a child, what was your thought process of like what you wanted? You you know, they look at you as parents as the most important people in their life. And so that's how I continue to try to even challenge myself now. It's like, what does it look like to be selfless and care about this child, right? Because you had your childhood. What does it look like for you? So I think if folks try to kind of think that way, it would be really helpful because it is a selfless act.
Man, how did your family think about the whole thing? Because you came up from a traditional family. And, how did they feel about you marrying within 11 months a person that was recently divorced? You adopting a whole new family. So did they support it right away, or they had to kind of warm up to him, or they had to kind of warm up to the idea?
I think it was super uncomfortable for them, more so because of the distance. Like, they only met him like twice. But
did that play a huge role in your decision too? Like what your family thought?
You know, no. Because no, because the thing is like everything that I knew my family wanted for me in a man, I knew was him.
Okay.
So I was so confident in like, it's just going to take time. Like once they actually know Gio, and that's exactly what happened. Like they just needed more time with him. And I think that was the most uncomfortable part for them. Just, they don't know you. You're like a million miles away. You're about to like get married. We've met you twice. Like that's kind of fast. And I know that it was hard for them, but
Okay. Now fast forward, you have a beautiful son, right?
Yeah. Josiah.
Yeah. So just talk about that. Talk about what it's like, that process, and just talk about him. Yeah. So
I'm gonna start. Yeah, so that was another huge trial, adversity, challenge that we experienced. It was a roller coaster though of emotions, because I remember finding out that I was having a son, and I was just like, wow, like it was like it was the biggest desire of my heart to have a son, Yeah. And I didn't think that I was gonna have a son because, again, some of the ways that I was raised in church, I just didn't understand God right, and the ways that I was taught was kind of like, God is this person that responds to your good behavior, so I was thinking about all the things I did wrong during that period of my life, during that season of my life when I was bitter and angry at God and blaming other people, and I began to live selfishly and very sinfully, and I just kind of thought like, yo, you've been through a divorce, you did this, you did that, you ain't gonna have a son, like that's something that you kind of missed out on because of your poor actions.
Yeah.
So when the doctor was like, oh, it's a boy, you can ask her, like, he had to verify that for me like 6 times, because I'm like, what? Like, it's a boy for real?
Yeah.
And so I was super excited. I remember telling my family for the first time, and I was just like, man, I couldn't believe it. Like I was just overjoyed. And I would think that the process, right, was smooth for you. 6.5 months later, right, 6.5 months later, it's Mother's Day, and earlier that day we were working out in my sister's garage, I think it was. Had a great workout, and she started complaining that her stomach was bothering her.
Mm-hmm.
And she used the restroom. There was a little bit of blood in her stool, so she went to my mom, and my mom was like, oh, that can be normal, but you probably should check it out, and we ended up driving to the hospital. I remember the conversation that we had. She was like, I feel weird, and she started asking, like, I wonder if these are like contractions. And I remember saying to myself, babe, I know one thing, you're not going into labor. That's what I said to her.
Well, no, I had a dream the night before. I don't have dreams now. I just had a dream I had Josiah early.
Okay.
I don't know why. I just told him in the car.
Yeah.
I was like, I had a dream last night that I had Josiah early, and he was like, you're not in labor. Like,
yeah. I was so sure.
Yeah.
Again, because my experience of a child, Naya, smooth, water birth, didn't even have her in a hospital. Like it was just, you don't expect complications if you've never been through that,
Yeah.
And I remember we were going into the elevator, and that was probably the first moment where I kind of saw her face. She looked a little pale, and I was like, maybe something really is like bothering her. So anyways, we go up there, they start checking the baby's heart rate. They're like the heart rate was good, everything looked good, and I'm like chilling. So I'm watching a UFC fight, and she's like, "Oh, can I use the restroom?" She goes to the restroom, and probably like 5 minutes later, I thought I heard her call me, but it was across an open room, and there was a bunch of nurses in there. So I got up and I looked out, and I saw all these nurses around where the bathroom was, and I was like, "Yeah, she didn't call me because they would have heard that someone called." So I sit back down, and then like 30 seconds later, like I hear like a scream or a cry, and then at that point I was like, "No, that's definitely her."
Yeah.
So I walk over to the bathroom, and as I get closer, I can hear her like screaming and crying, And I told the nurse, I was like, "Y'all open the door." So they unlock the door, and when they open the door, like she's holding, like all I see is blood, and she's just like got her hand right here, and she's just like, "Oh, I think I killed it. I think I killed it." And I'm just like, "What?" She was like, "The baby,
Yeah.
So the nurses run in, and they got her off the toilet and kind of lifted her up, pushed it back in, I guess, got her on the stretcher. And from there, it was like a roller coaster, like my whole focus at that point was just like being calm, because she kept making eye contact with me to see my reaction this whole thing. So I'm looking at her, and I'm just like, "We're good.
Yeah.
Let's just keep moving,"
Yeah.
Doctors got her on the bed, was like, they pulled me to the side. "Hey, look, we're going to try to stop this. It's too early. We're going to try to stop her from going into labor." They were talking about the different medications that they were going to give her. And I don't know, maybe an hour later, they were like, the specialist was like, they thought she was already dilated, 10 millimeters dilated. So they ended up breaking her water too soon because she actually wasn't dilated. She's got a mask on her face because of COVID. So at that time, they were like trying to make her like give labor with a mask on her face. So like it was crazy. Like waist down, my legs were like wobbling. I know like there were nurses that were behind me, and they could see it. Like they a few times they looked down, they saw my legs were just like trembling. Like, because I'm trying to be cool up here, with her, but like I was freaking out, I was just thinking all kinds of things, like, what's gonna, like, is he gonna be deformed? Like, what is he gonna look like when he comes out, so early? Man, I can't even remember all the thoughts that I had. I do remember just talking to the doctor, and she was just saying like, "Hey, here's all the possible complications," and that just struck me with fear. But even then, I was just like so focused on being strong for her, like just getting through this process so she doesn't, break down. That like I was just kind of like blocking everything out, She ended up getting the baby out, and when it came out, it was like it could fit in the palm of my hand. Like, it was like that big. Eyes were still sealed shut. Skin was like paper thin. Like, you can see all like the just the arteries and stuff.
Yeah.
And they took the baby right away. It was like a team of doctors, just intubated him and stuff. And they told us that he was alive, and that, he had a heartbeat and all that. And at that point, it was just like, what's next now?
Yeah.
Like, what's this, and it turned into a 7-month journey, being in and out of the hospital every single day, during COVID. So we had to go at separate times. Man, it was what a rough season of our lives. Like, that was in every way draining. It was mentally draining. It was emotionally draining. It was physically draining. In every way, it was extremely difficult. And like, for you, I can only imagine trying to breastfeed without a baby. She would have to bring home a blanket from the baby, smell the blanket, and then pump.
Wow.
And do that every 3 hours. Wake up 1 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., because we understood how important it was. If he's going to have any chance of developing normal, he needs breast milk and not the junk that they give you in the hospital.
Yeah.
So she was fighting like hell to I mean, I remember the night she produced like a drop of milk, and we just like, were overjoyed, that, and I was just so proud.
Yeah, how was that for you, Joan? Like just like he described, man, like having to, from the scream when, you went to use the bathroom, the baby came out, and to 7 months later being able, for that 7 months, were you able to hold him, or no? No, not
For eventually, it was probably about 3 months,
3 months.
3 or 4 months in.
Yeah,
we both got to hold him.
Yeah. So how was and this is your first child. Yeah, it's your first child. So I could just imagine, like the heartache that you must, or the mental aspect of everything.
Yeah.
That you had to fight through. So if you kind of speak on.
Yeah. It was.
On that just a little bit.
It was hard. I mean, like you said, all I remember was seeing the sack, like halfway out, and I was like, like you said, all I could say was like, he's dead. Like, he's dead. He has to be dead. Like, I know a sack shouldn't be coming out right now, and it's way early. Leading up to it, the nurses were asking me, like, how heavy are your cramps? And I told them, like, at 8, and they were doubting me, like, you sure? Like, that's really intense. And I'm like, oh, maybe not. Like, I didn't know what labor should feel like. I don't know that anybody does, but you probably expecting it to come not like so early. So,
and it was 6 months, 6.5 months.
Yeah. So I just didn't know what I should be feeling. And yeah, I think that Gio, like he said, was a really big part of me not like buckling in. I mean, I consider myself to be a pretty strong woman, but I do turn to him a lot, like for like just to be my rock, like when things are a little tough. So leading into it was definitely a tough journey. It hasn't ended. I think this was the biggest place in our marriage that God really showed us. God really showed us who he is. Because he's so faithful, like from beginning to end, and I won't say end, but because Josiah's still going, through his journey, but there were so many times that like we could just give in, and even as a couple, and just be like, this is too hard. We had a lot of difficult conversations about what it would look like to have a child with mental complications, or there were times where Gio wasn't going to the hospital as often as I was, so I was getting upset with him, and we were arguing, and but we kept putting our head down, and like we had a good community that was praying for us. We started praying together, praying over Josiah together, like we put our head down and we made sure to focus on him.
Yeah.
Or anything else, over what anybody said, over what the doctor said. Like they always had something like, and they have to do this, right? Prepare you, but it was always felt like something negative.
Yeah.
Like, oh, prepare, he might have cerebral palsy, or he might, and then my mom, in the very beginning, since she's a physician, she was like, chances of him living are like 50-50. She never told me that. She told him after I gave birth. It just felt like, and there's many situations where you feel like all odds are against you, and you have a choice to make. Like, are you going to give in to that, or are you going to press into the Lord and know that he is going to carry you through, and he is going to, like, you need to believe he's going to propel you forward, and he's gonna have you prosper in this situation. That's the hardest thing to do, but it's the most beautiful thing, because he's been so faithful. Like, he has preserved our marriage through that time where we could have just crumbled. He preserved Josiah. So it's been a season. Like, it's looked different for the last 3 years that he's been alive. Slowly but surely. The meaning of Josiah's name is sprinkling of the Lord, and I got it tattooed here on
Sprinkling of the word?
Of the Lord.
Of the Lord.
I got it tattooed on me specifically because in every little instance that we went through that journey, like maybe they said he's going to have a surgery, another one, 50-50 chance of what could happen. Even when he was being transported from the hospital to the next. They said 50-50 chance he'll live from the bumps in the road. And I just felt like every time, it sounds funny, but God sprinkled himself.
This is true.
Every time when he would lift a finger for the first time, or open his eyes for the first time, or we carried him for the first time, or he came home for the first time after 7 months, or he took his first step for the first time because he was crawling for so long, and we were like, oh God, we hope he walks, all the little things. We couldn't hear his voice because he has this thing on his trach that you seal so that the airflow doesn't go in. So we couldn't hear him cry, like a little baby. So the first time we heard him cry, it was like all these little things you probably take for granted, and God sprinkled himself every time. And he said, no, I'm here. I'm here, and I have your son in the palm of my hand, and I have you guys in the palm of my hand, and are you going to believe it? And that's the way that we made it through.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, like, there's so many things as parents, as people, that we take for granted. And I think, I really learned that with my son because it was very different than my first child being born. Like I didn't anticipate my child, or I didn't anticipate Naya speaking, or anticipate her moving her right side of her body or her arm, or just like the most basic things, because that was expected. That's what happens, for us, because of his setback, and him being tied to machines and two different tubes. Like, there were things that he had to fight for, basic motor skills that he had to fight for. Again, like not knowing what his voice sounded like for months, like never hearing a cry because he couldn't. We would see him cry. He would open his mouth and we could tell he's in pain, but you don't hear anything because of that,
And I think for context, so y'all understand, he wasn't just premature. He had BPD, which is basically severe. You could think of it as asthma, but like way worse. And because I know folks probably don't.
His lungs weren't fully developed.
Lungs weren't fully developed. He hit a wall. He couldn't make it past CPAP. So he was intubated for a long time. Then he was, when he couldn't make it past the thing that goes in your nose, which is what CPAP is, they said you have a decision to make. You could either wait here longer or give him a trach. And we're like, what's a trach? And they're like, basically it's a hole in his neck where he'll be connected to a ventilator to help him, support him through his lifetime. And that at that time, that was the only decision we could make to bring him home. All he would do was lay there, and not prosper. So just for some context, like that's it wasn't just preemie, which preemie is a big deal. Don't get me wrong, but like it's the journey after that.
Yeah. So, just seeing God show himself even through my son's development and the ways in which he stretched us. It became so evident that God was so intentional about what my son was going through in that journey with us, though.
Yeah, of course.
Like the way that he was growing us, the way that he was building our character, because there were certain things in our heart that started to show themselves during that journey. Like she mentioned me not going to the hospital. The reason why I had days where I would stop going is because, like, I was afraid of having a son that was deformed. I was or that had a disability. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was an athlete my whole life. Part of me wanting a son was like to be able to experience what my father experienced with me, to raise up, a young man in my image and my likeness, to get to experience the joys of athletics and sports and going to the games and stuff like that. And to see that, like, that may never be a chance, and then know that, hey, you still got to care for this child their entire life. Like, think what you want about me, but that, I didn't want that. Like, I didn't want that, but it was also God showing me where my heart was. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had to grow in that area. I remember calling Moochie and just crying on the phone, just like I was ashamed of that. So like confessing that part of my heart, you know, that I'd rather not have a son at all than have a son that has a disability was super hard.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, nah, man, that's good, man. And I think, you know, apart from God, like faithfulness, just in your journey, I think the one thing that when God put us through things, or when God brings certain things in front of us, like, I think one of the concepts he wants for us to grasp is the experience, not with each other, but the experience with him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? With God is so many different qualities. You could know him as a father. You know him as a provider. You could know him, you know, as a savior, as Lord. You know what I'm saying? And you know, I think back as my journey, like, you know, before my mom died, I was a believer for probably 10 years. And I always tell people I've never experienced God as a father until my mom died.
Yeah.
Right. But it's because I had to allow myself to experience him in that way.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? So I just think it's very encouraging for everybody that's listening to hear your story, how it started to where it's at now. You know, in closing, I just want you guys to touch on the responsibility and the international and the intentions behind nurturing relationships between you two, nurturing your marriage, and give advice for people that's probably in the same situation that you guys are in. Probably not with your son, but probably somebody who's been through a divorce and they are trying to navigate a new marriage or a new relationship with another person. So you guys just speak to that, and then you know, we'll close.
You wanna start, or you want me to? Yeah. So I think one of the most pivotal aspects of what got us to where we are continuously allows our relationship to progress, is the fact that we both place Christ and his truth as center. You know what I mean? Like, it is the core of how we choose to respond. Do we always get it right at the first? No. But we have a conversation about it, and we go back to what is true, you know, what is right. And I think throughout all of our challenging seasons, it's always been, man, what does God say about this? Like, I understand how you feel about me right now and what I just said, but what does God say about it? And that's always kept us progressively moving forward and causing us to have to look inward and saying, hey, the issue may not be you. It might be something going on in my heart. You know, I would say that's one thing, is like, what does God say about it? You know, and using that as a tool to overcome certain challenges. I would say the next thing is that we both are fighters. Like, we both work hard and understand that cultivation is required in a healthy relationship. Like, the same way you got to till the ground to plant seeds in order for them to grow. If you're not willing to till the ground, those seeds aren't going to get the right soil that they need, right? So when the rain comes, it's not going to make a difference. For us, it's like, we understood and we've had conversations that, hey, this is a grind. Like, we have to work towards what we want in our relationship and what God has for us. It's not going to just come just because we both said I do. Like, we have to be willing to cultivate and work hard and look at ourselves in the mirror and have grace when we don't want to have grace for one another, you know, and be merciful with each other when we don't feel like being merciful. You know, all that takes work. And then I would say the third thing is that you need to have a vision for your marriage, for your relationship. And you have to believe that like, life can be prosperous and life can be rich this side of heaven. You know, I think that a lot of marriages, they settle, man. They settle for mediocre. You know, for them, it's like, okay, we're Christians, we're married, we have kids, and we have a job. End story. Let's wait for Jesus to come. And it's like, man, that becomes so dull, especially when life smacks you in the face and you're like, is this really worth it? And all of a sudden you question the relationship. Then that, then other people start looking that much more appealing, because what you have is kind of like, there's no life behind it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I believe that God and his richness, he has so much for us, even this side of heaven. And one of the things that I've seen in our marriage is that even through all of the difficulties and the trials that could crush a relationship, we have continuously progressed in all senses of the word. Physical health, our finances has grown, our relationship with each other has grown, our relationship with God has grown, and we're talking about through my son and his setbacks and being in the hospital for all this time and having nurses in our house 24 hours a day. We're talking about through her meeting me while I'm living with my ex-wife at the time, her dealing with the insecurities, you know what I'm saying? Like all of that stuff, because of the way that we've trusted in God, because we've been willing to cultivate, and because we believe that God has something for us. We have a vision for our marriage, for our relationship, to grow and to prosper and to be the best we can in and through Christ. God has proven himself.
Yeah.
Through our relationship, whether it's been good or bad, So just because you're going through something difficult and you have rough seasons in your life, that's not a reason for you to live a mediocre life or say, hey man, this is just what it is for me. I'm just not meant to experience certain joys or blessings. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that would be three pivotal things that I think, got us where we are and where we're going.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree fully. I think the one takeaway I've had throughout marriage, and I mean, it just piggybacks off what he said, is when we get in like a difficult situation and whether I'm right, he's wrong, when I take a second to like separate from him because we might need some time apart, my first thing, and I mean this, is when I pray, because either I'm gonna like, even if I'm angry, upset, whatever, I like take a second and I'm like, God, like, how can I be more Christ-like in this situation? Like, what would you do for your son, or how would you demonstrate love for your son, and how should I do that to be more Christ-like or more like you in this situation, versus like what I want to do in my emotion. Or I think the biggest thing is also saying like, well, because you did this, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Versus
that's so easy to do.
Yeah.
Versus saying like, all right, let me take a second, and I'll be like, God, reveal to me like what I could have done different in the situation, or where my shortcoming was. And I try to have that mindset, and also speak to him, and like he said, look inward, but have that conversation with him, and like, how could I have been more Christ-like? How could I have demonstrated love in the way that you describe what love is? And I try to reflect to myself, and then showing grace and humbling yourself sometimes and be like, I'm sorry. Not letting time pass to say sorry to your partner. When you acknowledge something, you did something that might have not been spot on.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys, and thank you guys for sharing your story. It's very encouraging. I'm sure a lot of people is gonna be blessed just by your journey. I'm blessed by your journey. You know what I'm saying? And I've known you guys. I know some of it, but I've learned some stuff today. But yeah, man, if God is faithful to put you through it, He'll faithful to get you out.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah.
Appreciate you all. Catch you on the next one.
Good stuff.